Hey guys, this is Austin, and today I'm here with episode 3 of Tech I Like. Now of course, if you guys are new to the show, this is my weekly series where I go over all the different kinds of technology I like. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my personal favorites of all time, which is the Game Boy Advance SP. Now I've loved Game Boy since I was about 5 or 6 years old, and the Game Boy Advance SP is by far my favorite. Now, to kind of give you guys a little history lesson here, when the Game Boy Advance SP first came out, it was the next to last Game Boy that Nintendo made. So it of course does play Game Boy Advance games just like the standard Game Boy Advance, but it came with a lot of major new features. The first difference was design. Now, while the Game Boy Advance has a design that's somewhat similar to the PSP and the Vita of today, Nintendo took a very different approach with the SP. So they gave it a folding clamshell design, and in fact they still use that today in the DS as well as the 3DS. The second major change was that the SP had a rechargeable battery. Now we take that for granted today. It's actually something that was pretty nice to have on a Game Boy. Pretty much all the previous versions had AA's, or of course the Game Boy Pocket did use AAA batteries, but on the whole of it, they absolutely just ate up packs and packs of batteries, and it was a great addition that they did have a rechargeable in the SP. The last major feature was a frontlit display. And while again, this is something that most of us take for granted today, however, this was something that was really cool. This was the first Game Boy, with the exception of the Game Boy Light, that actually had a lit display. Now what this means is you can actually play it in the dark. So of course before, if you had a Game Boy, you had to be near a lamp or sunlight or something to be able to see the screen. But with the Game Boy Advance SP, turn on the backlight and you were good to go. Beyond that, it was all Game Boy Advance. So that meant it had backwards compatibility with the original Game Boy games as well as Game Boy Color. And since it was a Game Boy Advance, of course it could play Game Boy Advance games. Now, as far as the graphics and gameplay went, they were actually fairly similar to what you would find on the Super Nintendo. So as far as like sprite-based and pixel-based and however you want to say it, but kind of old-school games, this thing absolutely was awesome. So there were a lot of really nice games such as Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, Golden Sun, F-Zero, and the list goes on and on and on. The Game Boy Advance, in my opinion, had probably one of the best game libraries of any console, handheld or otherwise. Now I have to say, personally, the Game Boy Advance SP is by far my most played console of all time. I absolutely love that thing. Considering it's 9 years old now, it's actually held up fairly well. Now if you take a look at mine, it's definitely got lots of scratches. I've dropped it more times than I can count. You know, it was in my pocket for a couple years. Every single day I went anywhere, I kept it in my pocket. But hey man, thing still works. It still runs great. In fact, it's actually on the original battery after, not even exaggerating, probably thousands of hours of gameplay. 9 years old, and yet the battery still holds a 45-minute to an hour charge. Pretty awesome. Anyway guys, that's going to be about it for this week's episode of Tech I Like. If you guys enjoy these videos, always leave them a thumbs up. Really appreciate that, and it helps me out. And of course, if you're interested in more episodes, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I do them every Saturday afternoon. So anyway guys, catch you next time.